Hello guys, Croftus here. Why did the engineers and space jockeys go extinct? Let's explore this question in depth. In nearly every depiction of engineers, there's a sense of an ancient apocalypse that wiped them all out. In comic books, in the first Alien movie featuring the space jockey, also in Prometheus with the engineers, and in various video games, engineers appear as extinct species that vanished ages ago, and there are three main theories that might explain their disappearance. In the original Alien, the space jockey was fossilized, suggesting that several thousand years had passed with no one coming to recover the cargo. In Prometheus, the being that we see is described as the last engineer according to the script and the documentary. On top of that, the pathogen in the temple was crucial for the species, and since no one ever came for it, we can infer that the engineers were practically gone. In the video game Alien Dark Descent, there is an entire Xeno city filled with huge ancient space jockey corpses, suggesting extreme age and a forgotten catastrophe. Also in the comics, nearly every encounter with a space jockey implies an event that wiped out their entire civilization across the galaxy, leaving xenomorphs as the only remnants of this ancient advanced race. It's really puzzling that xenomorphs are the engineers' sole legacy, which leads us to three major theories about their disappearance. The first theory stems from official sources from the Prometheus documentary. While making Prometheus, Ridley Scott became increasingly fascinated by the engineers, and the more they thought about space jockeys, the more the story shifted away from xenomorphs toward that ancient race. Then the writers developed the Alien Master narrative, envisioning the space jockeys' civilization, their history and lore. The details from this document never appeared in the final film, but the blueprint suggests why engineers have disappeared. It states that they became so technologically sophisticated that they have abandoned sex and gender and started reproducing using more abstract methods. This concept echoes modern trends about gender and sex distinctions and drastic declines in fertility. The master narrative also claims that in recent millennia, engineers stopped reproducing completely, a direct path to extinction. So according to this official document about the engineer history, they had biologically upgraded themselves, outsourcing all reproductive processes, with new offsprings presumably formed through artificial means, likely a biotech environment that generated new engineers. So this theory suggests that they removed all sexual distinctions from their DNA. And it's evidenced in the opening scene of Prometheus, where the engineer doesn't have nipples, indicating that they have entirely eliminated female sex and were producing babies in biofactories through the black goo or the blood of the first deacon as hinted in early draft scripts. So once the engineers lost their ability to reproduce naturally, they likely lost their sexual organs. And when one of their experiments went wrong, violent xenomorph-like life forms emerged. Since those birth factories existed on many engineer worlds, xenomorph outbreaks occurred everywhere. And since xenomorphs are parasitoid organisms that kill their hosts, only their eggs remained, waiting for new prey. So in essence, artificial reproduction process went wrong, leading to grotesque outcome, causing the engineers' extinction. This parallels the real world where scientists can culture human embryos to the 14 days stage through IVF and can bioengineer a range of tissues and organoids in the lab, showing that parts of artificial reproduction are already technically achievable. So the idea of advanced bioengineering reproduction is plausible, but if that single artificial method fails, extinction is almost inevitable. Before we get to the third really controversial theory, let's explore another one that's also a viable possibility. Another explanation for engineer extinction is an engineer civil war. In video games, comics, and the films, engineer juggernauts seem to be designed to carry lethal payloads. In Prometheus, it was the black goo. In the 1979 Alien, the juggernaut carried thousands of ovomorphs according to the script. There also appears to be various subspecies of engineers. For example, the original space jockey in Alien is much bigger than the one in Prometheus, suggesting that there were at least two different groups within the same civilization. Planet 4 might also be home to one offshoot, perhaps a lower caste in the engineer hierarchy. At the apex could be the gigantic beings from alien Dark Descent, possibly 50 feet tall and fused with the walls of a vast xenocity. This range of sub-races, castes, or biosocial classes indicates the potential for a civil war, and the black goo and the xenomorphs could have been served as their main weapons, destroying all sides in the conflict. This also parallels our world as a warning for any species that develops doomsday capabilities like nuclear or hydrogen bombs. Another version of this theory proposes that the engineer in Prometheus was actually a drone, not a natural being, evident in his near-perfect appearance. As humans in the alien universe built David to represent an idealized human, the engineers might have designed biological drones according to their ideal that eventually revolted against their creators and wiped out both sides, mirroring David's rebellion against humanity. However, there is another really radical theory that flips the entire franchise upside down. Perhaps the engineers did not go extinct but evolved into xenomorphs. It may seem extreme and far-fetched, but there is some proof to this theory. 2 billion years ago, the engineer in Prometheus resembled a human, while the one who awakened on LV-223 2,000 years ago had extensive bio-augmentations. These rib-like features were actually permanent parts of his body, not an external suit, because we see actual suits stored elsewhere. So the engineer actually rose naked from cryosleep with bony structures embedded in his flesh. In the gap between 2,000 years ago and today, their final mutation could have been becoming xenomorphs. So over billions of years, engineers may have altered and experimented with their DNA to gain these new biological traits. And their final evolution could have yielded deacon-like beings either by accident or design. Continual reliance on biotech may have eroded their original nature, leaving them cognitively diminished, while technology assumed many of their natural functions. Humans actually experienced a smaller-scale version of this. It's been proven that our brains have shrunk relative to those of hunter-gatherers who needed to remember more to survive without modern tools. As technology replaced more tasks, our brains had less to do and actually shrunk. At the same time, when the environment became safer and easier, human brains also stopped working so hard. So if we extrapolate this phenomenon, the engineers might have offloaded so many biological and cognitive processes onto their biotech that they turned feral and animalistic. But once that technology was lost, they devolved into savage biocreatures like xenomorphs. The deleted version of the offspring in Alien Romulus shows the engineer hybrid eventually transforming into the xenomorph, which could be another piece of evidence that this is what actually happened to the entire engineer race. Another related concept emerges from cases of children raised by animals who never fully adapted to human society. Even when they were found in teenage years and brought back to civilization, they remained feral for the rest of their lives, as they missed a critical period of learning. Similarly, if engineers advanced too far and altered their bodies too much and then lost their technology, they could have forgotten their sophisticated heritage and became xenomorph-like monsters. This scenario offers a warning about technology that replaces our essential abilities and leaves us in a primal state if that technology fails. So this theory suggests that misjudged bio-upgrades or attempts at artificial reproduction eventually converted the engineers into xenomorphs. However, there is an even wilder theory that's unlikely to appear in any official works. It states that the engineers have transcended their physical form into a higher dimension. According to another paragraph in the Alien Master narrative, engineers were on the brink of a major evolution, a transcendence in which they will abandon their physical form and then take flight into the 10-dimensional multiverse as creatures of pure energy. This idea seems really woo-woo and incompatible with the usual tone of the Alien series, but there are still some hints that it could be true. Engineers remain conspicuously absent in the comics, games, and movies, despite overwhelming evidence of their past existence across the galaxy, as if they were gone at the snap of the finger. So it is sort of possible that they ascended to a higher dimension. In Prometheus, we see holograms that could be engineer energy signatures embedded in the temple. Also, a recent Marvel comic showcases David and his clones exterminating all organic life, while engineers are watching from the interdimensional space, implying that they have mastered multiverse travel. In that comic, they return from another universe to confront David and end his reign. That comic is probably not canon, but it still nods to the possibility that engineers evolved beyond our reality. So these are the four main theories about the engineers' downfall. First, they abandoned sex and gender, streamlined their DNA into a unisexual species reliant on artificial reproduction, and then were doomed when those methods failed. The second theory states that various engineer factions fought each other in a civil war using bioweapons that destroyed them. The third, really controversial theory suggests that engineers enhanced themselves with the black goo, eventually morphing into xenomorphs and forgetting their advanced origins. And the last, really far-fetched theory suggests that they may have transcended to another dimension, which is actually not that crazy considering that they have mastered interstellar travel 2 billion years ago. And it's not even conceivable what they could have achieved over such a large amount of time since then. Thank you guys for watching. What do you think is the reason engineers went completely extinct? Leave your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to join the Patreon for extra support. Also, like this video if you enjoyed it and subscribe to the channel for more content. My name is Croft and I'll see you in the next video.